swallowed by the sea, holding barriers of rock sea walls, uncertain destiny.
The Yidinji Proposition asserts that communities suffering the most adverse effects of climate change should be represented in decision-making by the United Nations and sovereign country agencies in addressing climate justice. These communities should be recognized as partners in the design of policy responses, in identifying evidence of impact and need, and in the delivery of solutions. Not only are these communities more keenly aware of how climate change is affecting them, but they are also holders of the traditional knowledge that can help to inform successful action.
The Yidinji Proposition calls for an enabling mechanism to be supported in each country that can work alongside national government to fill the gaps in local skills, while steadily building the capacity for localized project control.
Hi, my name is Trevor Tim, First Nation man here in Australia on the Big Island. My father's side, the Wanyi people, and my mother's side, Darnley Island Arab. I live here on Yidinji country. The Yidinji Proposition calls for mobilisation of existing global and donor funding mechanisms to address climate adaptation, but with a much better localised access to this funding.
This particular event is important to the Pacific Island Climate Action Network because it allows us to bring voices of the Pacific and provide nuance to the solutions that we are developing here today.
The Yidinji Proposition calls for a pilot for the fund to be established for the Pacific Blue Continent, focusing on the emissions from Australia and New Zealand, based on a levy of Australian dollars 25 per tonne CO2 emission, to be adjusted later when the global arrangements are finalised. The Yidinji Proposition calls for mediation to be applied to physical loss by way of regional insurance scheme, compensating for damage caused by asymmetric weather-driven events or progressive loss of habitable coastal land.
Aboriginal fire management is very complex and it's a lot of layers of knowledge and information, but it's all based on the really cool burn, which is low in intensity. The hot fires that we often see in the wildfires, and even the hot fires we often see with hazard reduction burning, is not good for the country.
So there's a difference of the return for food for animals. When you burn this at the wrong time, you'll have 6 months of no food. When you burn at the right time, you get food in 6 days.
The Yidinji Proposition calls for mitigation support for Pacific and Australian First Nations communities by A. Phasing out fossil fuels used in electricity and transportation. B. Implementing energy efficiency. C. Reducing or recycling waste. D. Carbon sequestration in forest or marine environments.
The Yidinji Proposition looks to offer concessional and private debt funding through UN COP-led arrangements, supported by country reserve banks or equivalent, as the basis to provide concessional debt funding for projects. The Australian and New Zealand governments should also establish funding specifically for supplementing this funding and reducing Pacific and First Nation communities' transport CO2 emissions through renewable energy transitions and the use of waste-to-energy technologies.
Global local transformation that is now required needs to demonstrate the following. 1. Established governance mechanisms within and amongst Pacific small nations provide a basis for a regionally coordinated policy framework as well as regional data collection that can inform policy implementation. 2. A Pacific pilot of the various funding mechanisms could be established as a pathway to establishing a globally consistent framework. 3. Climate justice initiative should be based on localised solutions derived from traditional knowledge systems and an understanding of each area's ecology as a whole, rather than promoting single-issue proposals and a one-size-fits-all solutions.
Other requirements for transformation are resource ownership and investment should be shifted towards grassroots communities so that there is local control of how investments are made, local control of outcomes, including risk, and local benefits in both the short and long term. Any mechanisms for addressing the impact of climate change needs to address maintenance of cultural knowledge, values and practices, as well as reversing damage and providing reparations to enable land and sea country to be revitalised. This proposition reflects significant collaboration and research carried out by Pacific Islanders and Australian First Nations representatives, with advice from EAROPH technical experts. We believe it provides a firm foundation for addressing climate justice in the Australian Pacific region and beyond. We ask that you pay attention to the proposition and we invite your support.
Ancient knowledge of the sea, protectors of their tribal